民主自由，
假的！
疫苗归零，
假的！
为人民服务，
假的！
打黄扫黑，
假的！
新冠疫苗，
假的！
宗教自由，
假的！
为民服务，
假的！
爱民如子，
假的！
结束中共
真的！
恶魔统治世界，
真的！
言论自由，
假的！
集会自由，
假的
！8964，
真的！
宗教迫害，
真的！
反腐扫黑，
假的！
习近平，
下台！
共产党，
下台！
In the video, a group of people who have fled from China gathered in the United States, putting up banners to expose the lies of the Chinese Communist Party government and to protest against its tyranny. The CCP's 2 sessions have recently convened, and the CPC's economic issues have once again attracted international attention. The main concern are, firstly, the planning and objectives of economic development, and secondly, whether there will be any changes to the recent trends of emphasizing state over private enterprises. Regarding the economy, they're necessary to discuss the growing prospects of private enterprises in China. However, private businesses have faced significant challenges to survive in China over the past few years. In recent years, numerous cases of political persecution against private business owners in China have emerged, with many losing billions in assets overnight. Their families and companies' employees have also been implicated and imprisoned. A Chinese lawyer involved in similar cases has disclosed details.
I'm in Meizhou, dealing with a case involving a private business accused of organized crime. This case may have the same issues with others, where economic disputes are escalated to criminal offenses. Cases from years ago are being retraced, and now new convictions are being made based on old confessions, without any other objective evidence, leading to the seizure and confiscation of billions worth of assets. Protecting private business owners should not merely be verbal, but should be genuinely reflected through the rule of law and judicial practice. I hope this case has a favorable outcome.
Besides the involved lawyers, several prosecuted Chinese business owners have shared their experiences with the media, recounting their experiences during the CCP's so-called Purging crime campaign. A private business owner living in the United States named Chen Ting is one of them. In May 2020, his business was suddenly shut down overnight, and his family members were arrested. Nearly 20 people were being convicted. Chen's business in Zhoujiang, Jiangsu included a furniture factory, several mines, and a pawn shop. Regarding the incident, he said the police suddenly stormed in and arrested all the males in the house. Then all the company's managers and legal representatives were arrested. There were no warnings before their arrest. Those arrested were all sentenced to prison, some to 18 or 19 years, others to 15 years. Every single one of my relatives who could be convicted were all sentenced to prison as well. Even those without legitimate charges got 1 to 2 years. Chen was puzzled by the whole situation, believing that without any legal basis, his business and assets worth over $1 billion were all seized and frozen. Properties and the company were auctioned off, and many of the company's assets were taken away without any charges. His lawyer was expelled from the courtroom, not even given a chance to plead. He managed to escape his calamity because he happened to be on a business trip in Hong Kong at the time. After the incident, Chen Ting found out that the government intended to seize his assets without any legal basis, so they used a red notice as the justification for their actions. In China, under CCP law, a red notice allows for the confiscation of assets without charges. He said, when the red notice was brought to the Ministry of Public Security, they said I did not meet the criteria for it. Later, the director of the Jiangsu Public Security Department approached the CCP's Political and Legal Affairs Commission asking them to ensure the task was completed. That's how they circumvented the system and put me on the list. The justification given for seizing Chen's assets was ridiculous. They accused him of being a member of an organized crime group without any evidence. After arresting Chen's company and family, they posted notices online calling for accusations and reports, which they then used as evidence. Chen said they forced legal companies to report on us, threatening them with sanctions if they did not comply, because we had to push these companies for the payments that they owed us. the police used this as an excuse, claiming that our phone calls demanding payment constituted soft violence. These debts have been legally confirmed by court rulings, and our efforts to collect payments were carried out through proper legal procedures. Chen added that the police acted this way to meet the government's performance targets. Media outlets have reported that the Shandong Provincial Procuratorate established performance goals mandating that each local prosecutorial office must handle at least one organized crime case annually or risk failing their yearly evaluation. Yet actual criminal organizations often remain untouched by the CCP government because they're only focused on more manageable targets for their so-called Purging crime and evil campaign. In an absurd turn of events, in 2019, the local government of Wuxi City, Jiangsu province, investigated 400 toddlers from Xinguang Kindergarten as part of its Purging crime and evil campaign. It's hard to imagine how these children under 6-year-old, unable to even wield a baton, could pose a threat to social security. Chen Ting commented, the government set up a campaign setting quotas for each province on how much they have to pay. These are mandatory quotas. At the time, Secretary of the Jiangsu Provincial Party Committee, Liu Qi, wanted Jiangxi to rank first in China, so he aggressively pushed private companies to meet these quotas. All economic disputes and debt transactions were classified as economic crimes, labeled as illegal lending or illegal financing. A private business owner in China named Shun Jingliang, now residing in Canada, also fell victim to the Purging crime and evil campaign. He was involved in real estate in Nanshan City, Jiangxi province, and may have been targeted because he offended a powerful official in the province. As a result, he was framed during the CCP's so-called Purging crime and evil campaign in 2018. Sun mentioned that in his case, illegal cases were filed first and then followed by arrest. At the time he was in Hong Kong, authorities first arrested his family members and company employees. A week later, they sought online to gather criminal evidence. If no evidence was found, they would then target his family members and employees using torture to force confessions. The CCP government also accused him and his brother Sun Bo-chen of being leaders of an organized crime group. In 2021, his brother received a red notice by the CCP government, leading to his arrest upon entering Croatia in Europe. The Croatian court later demanded that the CCP's Ministry of Public Security provide evidence of the accusations within 30 days. After waiting 60 days without getting any evidence, Sun Bo-chen was released in December 2021. Until now, on some websites in China, announcements from the Jiangxi Public Security Department calling for public tips on illegal and criminal activities related to Shun Jingliang, Sun Bo-chen, and other business owners can still be found. During this persecution, Shun Jingliang saw nearly 4 billion of his assets confiscated, and 3 generations of his families were mentally devastated. Moreover, 4 relatives and friends lost their lives due to the persecution. He said, "My mother suffered a sudden death from a mental breakdown when our home was being raided. My brother, who was detained in Croatia for 11 months, was mentally traumatized and passed away in 2023 at the age of 50. 2 innocent friends couldn't withstand the interrogations and committed suicide the same night they were released." He added sadly, "Had I not been wealthy, I believe I wouldn't have been targeted or ended up in this situation. But I genuinely don't know how to prove my innocence." As Sun Jingliang points out, under the CCP's regime, having wealth often translates to being guilty. The CCP's approach of linking wealth to guilt isn't a new strategy. Historically, the party gained power by seizing land from landlords to distribute to peasants. Now, amidst economic challenges and substantial national debt, it seems the CCP continues to target the wealth of those who they call capitalists. A 2021 report from the Jiangxi provincial government revealed that over 3 years, Jiangxi had dismantled 1,218 criminal organizations and investigated assets totaling 28 billion yuan. They even addressed a number of criminal organizations that matched the total from the previous decade. The question remains how many of these cases were truly about combating crime and how many resulted in unjust prosecutions. Ye Ning, a human rights lawyer in Washington, D.C., commented to this press, "The CCP's so-called Purging crime and evil campaign, which uses political campaigns to bolster authoritarian goals, are out of step with modern legal principles. The practice of arresting first, gathering evidence later is fundamentally flawed. The United States legal system employs a method known as forensic auditing to distinguish between criminal and non-criminal assets, ensuring that only the formal can be confiscated. Though Chinese law normally upholds this principle, its actual application is fraught with inconsistency and opacity. Ye also noted that the CCP's accusation against the private business owners are mostly under the guise of business fraud. Accusations of murder or arson require strict evidence, but the legal boundaries for business fraud are vague, and the evidence threshold is low. Most business owners targeted with red notices are accused of business fraud, a catch-all charge used to request arrest through Interpol. Given the CCP's history of politicizing criminal charges and criminalizing politics, the US Department of Justice maintains the highest alert level for red notices issued by the CCP. As the persecution by the CCP intensifies year by year, more and more private business owners choose to flee, with Canada being one of their top destinations. On March 2nd, a group of private business owners in Canada officially established an anti-communist alliance. In interviews with the media, they stated they aim to do three things. The first aim is to unveil the truth about the persecution of private business owners by the CCP, as many people in China are unaware of the realities of this persecution. Therefore, they intend to share these truths with the public, revealing what private business owners have endured. The second goal is to seek legal action through international courts, exploring the possibility of international legal assistance to bring charges against the CCP. The third objective is to aid those private business owners still suffering under the CCP's oppression in China, offering support to those wishing to flee the country. Independent television producer Li Jing participated in interviewing these private business owners and noted 2 points from the interviews that made a lasting impression on him. The first insight the business owners gained was that their suffering wasn't just because of a few corrupt officials. They had hoped that changing these officials would stop their troubles, but as they learned more about the CCP's history, they came to see that the real issue wasn't just a few bad apples. It was the CCP systems itself that was a problem, highlighting a deep-seated issue within the party. This meant that merely replacing officials wouldn't change anything. The second point mentioned was their understanding that fundamentally the CCP does not welcome capitalists or private enterprises. The party only utilizes these business owners and foreign investments to overcome economic difficulties. Once the state economy was strong enough, they would forcibly push private enterprises out. Hence, they advised domestic private business owners not to have any high hopes for the CCP. A former Shanghai entrepreneur named Hu Liren, now living in the United States, analyzed that the suppression of private business owners in China is essentially a political issue. Without political reform within the CCP, private capital remains a risky investment. He mentioned that during 1955 to 1956, the CCP conducted a campaign of merging public and private enterprises, which was a devastating blow to all private business owners in modern China. This persecution continued for decades, culminating in the Cultural Revolution. While the Cultural Revolution appeared as an internal power struggle within the CCP, it also targeted capitalists in a large-scale purge, particularly in areas with dense private capital like Shanghai. As a Shanghai native, Hu said back then families with capitalist ties faced severe persecution. Government officials would forcibly enter homes, not just for public criticism, but to financially ruin these families. Some were even driven out of their homes, and there were instances where capitalists were physically assaulted to death. From that point onwards, a widespread fear of the CCP took hold among the people. So why is the CCP so determined to destroy the private economy? Editor-in-chief of the Epoch Times, Jane Guo, offered her perspective, saying that living conditions of modern capitalists in China are extremely poor. The first reason, which is well known, it's political. It's easy for capitalists to be discarded and become targets of persecution by the CCP. The second reason is a shift in power dynamics. Power in society comes from three sources: violence, wealth, and knowledge. Since the economic growth from China's reform and opening up has largely relied on the private economy, which occupies a significant portion of China's wealth, the societal power began shifting towards wealth and capital. This poses a direct threat to the CCP's regime. Therefore, the CCP's suppression of private capitalists stems from a fear of losing power, ensuring that private enterprises cannot unite to form a significant social force that would challenge the party's closed power structure. Moreover, targeting private enterprises has become a significant source of income for the CCP. Jiangsu mentioned that the most profitable industry in China now is the anti-corruption campaign. She shared a story. A friend of mine was arrested over a decade ago, and his assets were frozen for auction to pay taxes. His courtyard house in Beijing, Purging area, was auctioned off for only 800,000 yuan, while the market price for such properties is several billion yuan. Even 10 years ago, it could still have sold for 30 to 40 million yuan. The auction was so cheap. Who bought this asset? He told me it was the same people who arrested him. The auction was led by the court, and nobody knew about the auction except for one bidder, who was, of course, their own people. This is robbery, implemented through legal means, a robbery through power. The current Purging Crime and Evil campaign operates quite similarly. The so-called anti-corruption efforts in China now are also about plundering wealth. On the surface, we see a corrupt official fall, but following that, a group of bribing business owners also falls. The method to deal with these business owners is simple. It's completely fine if they pay money, but otherwise they'll be persecuted and sentenced to prison. The situation has recently taken a turn for the worse, with increasingly shocking developments. A business owner from Hunan found himself suddenly arrested and interrogated by the prosecutor's office. Asked if he was acquainted with a secretary who had been recently fired. While the business owners admitted to knowing the secretary, he denied any allegations of bribery. Despite this, the prosecutor's office demanded he confess to bribing the secretary, setting the bribe amount at 30 million yuan due to the involvement from the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. After being arrested for over a year, resisting the pressure to confess, the business owner eventually gave in. His family had to pay the prosecutor's office 30 million yuan for his release, a sum that was then labeled as bribe money. Once the payment was made, the charges of bribery were promptly dropped. This practice has turned into a revenue-generating strategy for local governments. This replacement of an official often triggers the use of this tactic to inflate local government income. As a result, with the removal of numerous corrupt officials, this approach has proven to be a lucrative revenue stream. Jiangsu also observed local governments struggling with reduced revenues and overwhelmed by debt have found a new avenue for economic stimulation through this model. It has caused widespread fear among the entrepreneurs, prompting a growing number seeking to flee the country.